Hi, I'm Tina Medina, and I'm from Dallas, Texas. And these are my four artworks behind me. In these artworks that I created, I'm inspired by my experiences growing up in Texas as a Mexican American woman, and specifically by my family who were farm workers. And so through these artworks, I'm kind of honoring them, but also thinking about people throughout the United States who continue to do this kind of work. And I was also really interested in portraying the cultural ramifications of being from two cultures and what that feels like, and how these two cultures are so merged together that you cannot separate them. That is just who we are, and that's where these artworks came from. In this artwork here is a photograph of my grandparents, and in the center of them is my dad. And they were farm workers, and they went throughout the country picking produce to feed the rest of the United States. And so in this artwork, I decided to recreate the photograph, which initially was a very small photograph, and I wanted to blow it up, and I wanted them to be larger than life. And so I also painted directly onto the photograph, and I created the rows of the crops that lead up to my dad's face, which my dad is a little boy in this picture. And so he was also growing up in the United States, traveling from state to state, helping his parents pick crops. And so I wanted to incorporate that into this work. And I also painted on top some indigenous Mesoamerican symbology underneath him, and the idea of roots that are growing down into the ground, and how the roots of our cultura and who we are as people, like we started to grow in different places. And we definitely started growing in Mexico, but also growing in Texas and the United States. And so I wanted to represent that in this particular work. As I continued to work with the flag, the US flag, I began to also reflect on the experiences of the undocumented people, but especially families with young children, to be caught in this awfulness in the United States where they are tearing families apart. And so I had a reaction to that as well. And I wanted to show what it was like for them to live in the United States. They were hiding, but they were also being victimized in a way. And it continues to this day, where they're afraid to seek medical attention. They're afraid to seek police attention and protection because they don't want to be torn apart from each other. And so families being torn apart, I thought about the idea of a chain link fence that reminded me of pictures that I've seen of detention centers in the United States and children sleeping on the floor, on the cement floor. And so it really moved me, and it really, I just got so impassioned by it and upset. And I wanted to show that. So I cut the US flag in the pattern of a chain link fence to represent literal and figurative borders. In 2017, I was very dismayed at what was happening during that time period, and I became very disappointed with what was going on in the country. And it caused me to have a reflection and a reaction by thinking about the US flag and what that means and the symbology behind it. I was thinking about how important it was and how I grew up saluting the flag and saying Pledge of Allegiance. And I wanted to show how I was very much both Mexican and American, and that you could not take those two away from each other. So I took the American flag and I took the Mexican flag and I cut them, and then I interwove them, and then I sewed them back together to create a new flag to represent what it feels like to be Mexican American. And I knew that that's what I felt like for me, but I also knew that it probably would resonate with other people as well, especially DACA students, especially people who were undocumented and who came here to the United States at a young age and grew up in the United States and were American but were without papers. And so I was really moved by their plight, and I wanted to create something that represented that. So in 2019, my dad passed away. And it was a double-edged sword because I was really heartbroken when he passed away, but I was glad that he passed away before the pandemic hit, because then I was able to be by his side. when he took his last breath. In the process of that morning, I received a collection of photographs that I inherited from him, but he got from my grandmother. So these are photographs that came back from as early as the 1930s and into the 1950s. And so with these photographs, I actually continue to make lots of work. I make a lot of collage work currently. And it started with this particular piece where I was looking at photographs, and this is a photograph of my grandmother, who was 13 at the time. And this is my great aunt and my great uncle. And it's a picture of them, like a little family portrait, but they look so serious. It's so stunning. I just reflected on maybe what their life was like, why they looked that way. It must have been a very hard life. And this was taken in Mexico. But I was thinking about how this family, this little family of children, when they grew up, they were going to move to the United States and start roots there. And so it's called Semillitas because they're like the little seeds, they're the beginning. And it reminds me of that saying, they didn't know we were seeds, because it's like the idea of pushing down a group of people, and it almost feels like pushing them down into the ground, but then we're so resilient that we still rise up. And we're the seeds in the ground, we rise up, we're floreciendo, we're growing up and we're doing beautiful things as a cultura. And so this is my family, and I honor them, and they're the roots that grew into the United States, and I'm the legacy of that beautiful family.